maybe we can get started just with a really quick introduction for what we're chatting about today. And the title of this webinar is Building Resilience, right? Strategies to overcome burnout and increase employee retention. And let's be honest, burnout is basically this like uninvited guest that keeps showing up at the workplace party, and not just showing up, but it's like raiding the snack table. It's taking over the playlist. It's making everyone miserable. And as much as we talk about self-care and work-life balance, like burnout isn't just like an individual problem, it's an organizational one. So how do we stop people from mentally checking out or quietly quitting or just full on walking away? And more importantly, how do we create a workplace where people actually want to stick around? And that's what we're going to be digging into today. Hopefully we can, get real. We can share some real insights and honest insights and maybe even laugh a little bit because, I don't know, humor is a coping mechanism, right? So today we are very lucky to have two experts in the room who know a thing or two about building workplaces that people actually want to be a part of. So let's give a warm welcome to Kristen, who's the Director of Organizational Development at TriNet, and Smitty, who's the co-founder and COO at AdvantageClub.ai. I'm Lee. I'm your host for today and also the CEO and founder of Confetti. For those who aren't familiar with us, we are the leading solution for live hosted virtual events. We support over 10,000 remote, hybrid, and even just like global organizations. Any company that basically doesn't always get the opportunity to meet their team physically on a regular basis, those are the companies that we're supporting, bringing a little joy, bringing a little fun into their day-to-day life. Kristen brings 20 years of experience driving strategic HR initiatives across industries. And Smitty has a long list of accomplishments, including being a TEDx speaker and part of the Forbes Human Resource Council of 2025. She now helps organizations improve employee experience through tech and mentorship. So before we dive into the first question, I have a quick housekeeping notes, but we are loving the engagement that we're seeing here, and we want that engagement to stick around with us. So please continue using the chat, and on Zoom, there is a Q&A feature that we will be monitoring throughout the panel/webinar. So if you've got questions for Kristen, for Smitty, or myself, please just drop them in there at any time throughout the session. You don't have to wait until the end. If for some reason we don't get your questions live, don't worry, we've got you. We're going to make sure that we follow up with direct answers via email that you use to register. And this isn't a lecture, right? We want this to feel like a conversation. So feel free to comment, react, share your own take, let us know if you want to jump in to give your opinion, but let's learn from each other while we're here. So let's get to it, starting off with the basics. And we all know burnout is a problem, right? But why is it happening at such alarming rates? Kristen, I'd love to start with you. What's changed in the modern workplace that's making people feel more exhausted than ever?
In preparation for this, I started doing a little bit of research, and every time you open up any sort of publication, there's at least one article around burnout. So it is a very prevalent topic. I'd like to think that a couple of things contribute to it, at least in my opinion. We have technology, social media, those things that are constantly hitting us, constantly bombarding us. I think those contribute. I'm seeing shifts in generational workplace, just the shift where people are more comfortable talking about stress, whereas before it was just like, just suck it up, buttercup. That's how you roll. Um, and the other thing that I think is really not talked about that frequently is that human beings crave stability. Like that is our center point, is stability. And
Mm,
so we have so much change going on that people, I think, they feel like they're on quicksand. They don't know what end is up. And that's just the research that I'm pointing to and just what I see in talking to our clients on a regular basis.
totally. I love that. Smitty, do you want to chip in as well?
Yeah, so From just, the way Kristen mentioned it, from like a burnout perspective, uh, I was reading this by the American Medical Association. They've reported that 55% of men and 55% of women and 42% of men, they report feeling burned out during, work whenever they're in office. So it's a very common occurrence nowadays. And I feel that one of the reasons why it is like enhanced over time is, I think earlier when we were not in a hybrid setup, we were used to those, going out with colleagues for like your 4 p.m. coffee, or you'd meet people. It'd be more interactive during the day when you're at work. Now you're stuck in front of a computer for the entire day. You don't have like a lot of physical human interaction during the day. While it's great for work-life balance, but from like a psychological safety standpoint, you start feeling that you're less supported. You start feeling that there's a disconnect between people, which used to be there on a personal level. And that is also why I feel burnout has increased over time.
No, totally. And maybe you can elaborate on that, Smitty. Like, what are you seeing from your side, especially with like the tech tools that were supposed to make life easier? Are they helping? Are they just giving us more to juggle?
Yeah, no, I think technology should be an enabler. Technology is not like a magical way to just fix your problem. Of course, there are technology tools which you can utilize, like Confetti is a great example, right? So you can do virtual events and engage people to kind of feel connected and feel more belonged at work. If you take our example for AdvantageClub.ai, you could implement recognition programs like appreciation programs where, hey, you helped me out, I'm going to give you a shout out, for example. um, but at the end of the day, it all boils down to adoption. So you can implement all the tools you want, but if you're not driving initiatives to drive higher utilization and usage, there is no point, because it'll eventually fizzle down. But if you can use it effectively, I think technology is a great enabler for reducing burnout.
All of that. Yeah. Kristen, is there anything that you want to add before we move on to the next question?
I don't know, it's an enabler element there, and it's Smitty, I think you nailed it when we talk about that human connection is so missing. That that ability to go to lunch and maybe vent a little bit and to just have a, an opportunity to go, I'm not happy about something, rah, rah, rah. That I think we don't. I think about like the teapot, right? We're sort of always on simmer and we don't have that opportunity to let that spout. So sometimes it comes out in bad ways. Sometimes you wait until you get home and you take it out on your spouse or your kids or your dog or things like that. So I think that's one thing that's missing that is so critical is having just those unscripted moments that aren't technology driven. And that's something that a lot of us are missing.
I totally agree. We usually really try to make sure at confetti that we spend the first 5 minutes like genuinely authentically connecting with somebody
Hmm.
and catching up. If you know that they took PTO, where did you go, did you have fun, like actually like get some kind of story out of them. And I've actually been doing something a little bit different lately, because everybody, when they say like how are you, there's it's just so easy to default to
Oh,
like
I'm
I'm
fine.
okay, or like I'm fine,
Yeah.
yeah, everything's great. And I've been being real with people, just like really giving them like where I'm at in that day, and like finding that it's like quite an icebreaker, and people are like genuinely authentically connecting back with me. And so that's been a nice little tip. So, next big question, work life balance, great in theory, but it feels kind of like a unicorn. Everyone talks about it, but like no one really sees it. What does a realistic version of work life balance look like today? And how do we get leadership to actually support it?
I don't
And
think there is such a thing as balance, right? I mean, realistically, I saw, and I wish I could attribute it to who I saw, but somebody had talked about like really it's more work life integration. And, I think often it's creating rituals around disconnecting. And I know that through the pandemic, for example, I had my computer in my bedroom, and as soon as I got up, I'm sitting in my pajamas, you know, on the computer doing work. And there really was no blend, like there's this closure. So I like the idea of some ritual. So at 5 o'clock, maybe something pops up and you close your computer, you close your laptop, you turn your camera off, and you go do something that's just for you. Now you may come back and do work, but you have some natural conclusions that we don't get often in this hybrid, where you'd get in the car and drive home and you have that moment to decompress. And how to get leaders to support it, I think that's always the challenge, because you can't control what somebody's doing, but we can try to reward maybe those behaviors. um, I try to make a point of not sending emails after hours, or if, or putting a note in there that says, do not respond until tomorrow. This is not critical. I just needed it in my head and out of my head. So,
Yeah, I have a couple of things that you made me think about, but one of them is, at least with my emails, the way that I've been organizing them is like urgent needs to be responded to
mhm,
today versus like things that are high priority. So between, today or tomorrow, it's good versus medium or low priority. And you can start to figure out what that is, but it's sometimes helpful that it's like the end of the day. And I'm like, okay, I really need to disconnect. And the only emails that I feel like I really need to get done is the ones that are in like urgent today, make it happen.
mhm,
Um, and I think that there's such like value with being a remote first culture and having that be like a benefit that we can enjoy. And like something my co-founder and I have been doing is like and I'm very curious for the chat. Like I feel like if there were faces and like actual hand raises, many people would agree like we're just not getting the steps that we would like to see ourselves get throughout like the day or throughout the week. Um, and so, find your workplace bestie. And one day, maybe you go for a walk. Maybe the next time they go for a walk. And on the time that they're in front of a computer, they're taking notes, and you swap kind of responsibilities. That way you can still do those meetings. You can still get those steps. And like, there's so many things that we can do to actually integrate, as you called it, Kristen. Smitty, I'm excited to hear what you have to say about it.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with Kristen's remark on work-life integration, because we can't expect balance when your office is like a door away from your bedroom, right? You're out of your bedroom and you're in your office. First, in some cases, your office is your bedroom. So it is integrated, definitely. And like Kristen said, creating those boundaries, creating those rituals, it helps. One of the things which, like, well, now it's much easier to work from home because you can go out and you can do your thing post work. But during lockdown, during when nobody was going out, during peak COVID, we started doing these fun, because people weren't going out for lunches, but you could get like deliveries done in your home, or you could cook at home. So we started doing these fun luncheons with like small groups of teams, where everyone would just turn their cameras on, and you'd be eating a pizza or whatever you're eating. You'd spend like, and not a big group, like max a group of like 8 or 10 people,
mhm.
and you do like a 30-minute connect, not talk about work at all during those 30 minutes, and just chat about how you're feeling, how things are going, or how you're coping up with this work from home setup which you're not used to. So creating those engagement programs as well, along with how you're trying to create differences in your working and your actual life, helps.
Love that. And we have a really cool tip on the chat from Melina. She says, I find allowing for autonomy, working in a way that works for you, is more impactful than trying to make work-life balance a thing. And
Mm.
I agree with her. So I want to talk about something that I like to call the hustle culture, and I feel like it very much still lingers. This, desire and this need to constantly be on, constantly working, constantly being, in this grind 24/7 mentality. Are we finally moving away from that, or is this still very much like alive and well? And I think let's talk about it also from like an employer perspective. Like, we know that we need employees to work and be productive. And especially a lot of companies right now are feeling the heat and the pressure of macroeconomic things and like the need to succeed. Otherwise, maybe people won't have jobs. So like how do we balance that like hustle culture that we need to survive versus also balancing in like shifting that mindset?
I
Hmm.
think the first thing is to not glorify that. So, you know how we glorify a lot of these things that, oh, this person responds to an email within 20 minutes, irrespective of whenever you send them an email. So, eventually, I think we've created a culture in which we glorify the always on personality, and that becomes like a status quo for everybody to look up to. So, I think in any organization, there is always maybe a 10 or 15% set of people who need to be more on than others. But I think for the rest of them, especially from a leadership standpoint, you need to understand that if it's not a super critical role, if it need not be responded or looked at immediately, let people do it in their specific work hours. And it has to
Totally.
be a push from the management. Like Kristen mentioned, she does a
Needs to be
great thing.
communicated.
Says, you don't have to respond right now, but I just want to get it out of my head. So it's okay for me to send it to you late in the night, but you don't need to respond to it late in the night. So it has to come from the leadership eventually.
100%. Yeah. And Kristen, I would love your take on this from like an organizational development perspective. Like, how do you feel like you can help leaders see that healthy employees equals better work, not just more hours?
We rely on stats and studies. I mean, people are doing studies all day long, and the proof ends up being in the pudding. When we have organizations who are really struggling with this, one of the go-to efforts that we try to implement is let's define what success looks like. So if you can put down in words, hey, to be successful in this role, you need to do these things. And even that needs to, be looked at regularly. But if you define what success is, and it doesn't include answering emails at 10 o'clock at night, or it means that you're doing the work whenever, like if you say, listen, I don't care when you do it, this is what needs to, be accomplished the week. I feel like that allows that freedom for the employee to go, I am meeting those objectives. I am meeting those things. So that's one way that we tend to help clients to um, get, get there over that particular hump.
So
Love
like a
it.
focus on the outcome instead of
Hmm.
the number of hours needed to reach that outcome.
Exactly, exactly. Just tell me what I need. I'd say this all the time that most employees, when they show up to work, don't want to do a crappy job. They want
Mm.
to know how to be successful. So tell them the formula. It's not a secret. Here's what it means to be successful. Here's what success looks like. Here's how you can, move forward. Here's how you can have career growth in our organization. If you can spell out those things, then people understand, okay, hey, I need to put in a little extra work now, but next week may not be as crazy, and then they can start to modulate their own behaviors and activities accordingly.
So the classic culprit is workload as well. How can leaders do a better job of distributing that work fairly? How do we maybe also, just like we've all sat through meetings that could have easily been an email or better yet, like nothing at all? Like, what needs to happen to give people their focus time back? And I know, I sorry, I keep on forgetting that because like it's just a conversation, so I
Yeah, yeah,
just want
yeah.
to make
No, and I'm sitting here thinking about how I might want to frame that. I mean, you brought something up, Lee, when somebody says, "Well, how are you?" And we go to this immediate response, "I'm fine." Right?
yeah.
So my thought around like how can we do a better job would be asking a different question. If you want just a pat answer, go with the pat answer. But if you really want it, like tell me a little bit more. Tell me what's worked. Um, where are you struggling? What was successful for you? Ask a different question that causes the employee to stop and think about the response. I think allows you to get a little bit deeper. And for me, And with other organizations I've seen, make a list of different questions. If it's not kind of part of your vernacular or part of your vocabulary, start to ask questions differently. And then when you find things, like what would make this process better? That is an open-ended question. It's not a yes or a no. It really causes somebody to go, huh. And then allowing for me, it's also understanding your people and then allowing them space to go, you know what, if you don't know the answer to that yet, come back to me next week and tell me about what would make the process better. Though I think those types of questions not only demonstrate a care for the individual, which is so critical, but it allows input on workload. Well, it'd be great if I could shift this here or I could do this. I mean, things like then we create a dialogue, and that is so important to solving some of these problems.
Yeah.
Totally. I think there just needs to be more of like a culture of actually like calling things out, speaking up, right? Like I saw a Slack thread earlier today. Now it's easy because I'm a CEO, so people feel like, oh, you can say anything. But like there's a Slack thread that was like, oh my gosh, this actually needs to be a meeting. Like we're just going, you know what I mean? Sometimes it happens in reverse where you're like, guys, I'm reading paragraphs on paragraphs.
Yeah, and it's
I
never ending, and you're going, okay, wait, pause. Nothing's going to get done on Slack. We actually need to come together and talk about it.
exactly. So I think we just need to speak up. Smitty, I feel like you were just about to say something. Go for it.
Yeah, I was well, totally agree on the Slack piece, and I'm going to come to that. I mean, I think technology options like Slack, they really help us do the reverse, right? Convert meetings into non-meetings, which could just be like, it need not be an email. It could just be like a thread where you're all chatting about it. From a workload perspective, the funny thing is you can't equally divide work among everyone. I mean, it's really ideological, but you can't do
Yeah.
that. On paper, it sounds like a great solution, but it is not practical. Every company will have, say, 15 to 20% of their workforce who would be, say, star employees, right? And they're the ones who are your go-to people for everything. Something
Yep.
broke, hey, Dave can fix it. Or new initiative, Dave's gonna do it. Or you have questions, go to Dave. He knows everything. Now,
Yep.
while Dave here enjoys the attention, Dave is overwhelmed, right? And that adds to a lot of burnout. And there's always going to be more and more Daves in your company who eventually are given more work than their counterparts. And I think from a leadership standpoint, it becomes important for leaders to not give in to that urge to go to their go-to people for everything, and also acknowledge the fact that you need to be aware of the situation they're in, give them more non-go-to people to help them out. That also adds a better distribution of the workload within the team. And it doesn't also impact your efficiency. Now, if Dave had like 3 more people he could do that with, it wouldn't impact efficiency or the effectiveness of the job itself, but it would also not overwhelm Dave beyond a specific point in time. So that can be a good way of distributing work, especially when you have so much of it and you have like a limited pool of team members who can actually do it.
Totally. Some tips that I've seen that have worked really well for me. I am very big on blocking out time and telling people like this is not to be ridden over. This is like project focused time that I have. And if you want that meeting, it might need to wait until next week, or I
Hmm.
might need to say, no, go ahead, make a decision without me. This isn't super high priority. So carving out the time, saying no. And then another, I think, very big learning lesson is like when I think of some of my Daves in like at Confetti, a lot of it is like cultural. Like it's time, attention, like love and care that I put into these people that, you know, bring that love and attention and care back to me as their manager, as a team. And I encourage them to build their own Daves by putting love, care, and attention into team members that they see potential in, and giving them that opportunity and delegating those responsibilities out. It can be scary, but like most people that I know like really do want the opportunity to like try something new, to experiment, to be like, you know, put me in, coach, like give me a chance. And I think people are just often a little too afraid to let go of their Legos. Um,
But isn't that a cultural thing, Lee? You have to be okay with somebody doing something not how you would do it.
yeah.
And you have to be okay with fixing stuff and not I've worked with organizations where, it was a lot of like, hey, it's okay to fail. And then you do something and it wouldn't, and then you just get chewed up and spit out. And it's like, well,
Yeah.
Guess what? I'm never going to do again. I'm not going to go down that particular path. So it does become a cultural thing. And Lee, I love hearing that as the CEO because you do set the stage. You set the standard for what the behavior looks like and how it spills and cascades down. So kudos to you for that one.
I appreciate it. Well,
I did
we try.
I wanted to you mentioned something about meetings and it is just like this it just makes me crazy. And I do think that organizations seriously need to adopt some sort of meeting hygiene, some meeting protocols. Like, every meeting should have an agenda. Every person should be encouraged to be prepared, like it's, or it needs to define, hey, it's a working meeting, or it's no, you need to have read the agenda and be prepared for the meeting. And then the darn things need to end on time, really. Like no, no. We have a thing here at TriNet where all of our meetings end 5 minutes early.
Oh, that's so great. I feel like our my company's the opposite. It's 5 minutes late. Oh,
I would say that, but I swear most of my meetings are, I'm always a minute late. We're a minute late.
yeah.
We're like one more thing. And, a lot of that is just not having an agenda or really knowing what would define success inside of that meeting. Hey, when we leave, the objective of this meeting is to do this. And when we leave, we're going to have these and, we're going to have assigned responsibilities. When you get to that level of meeting hygiene, I feel like then you're having very productive meetings and people don't feel like it's another time waste.
Totally. Yeah. And I often I always hope that people don't see it as anything wrong culturally. Like, I can say as much as I want, but at the end of the day, people need to feel it. But like I'll sometimes be in a meeting and they'll be like, oh, I want to give you some time back. I realize like we probably shouldn't have invited you to this meeting. And I just want to give you your time back. You can stay if you want, but I don't want to waste your time. And I think normalizing that is helpful because like our time is valuable. Like we don't
Mhm.
want people to just attend a meeting if they feel like they have nothing to contribute. And like usually if I find that like one person on the group that I'm at is like quiet, that's kind of a good indicator to being like, maybe we should have just informed you on what this meeting is instead of, inviting you and having you listen to all of the in between how the sausage is made.
Mm.
Right. And one of the funny
Well,
thing is that when you have say back-to-back meetings, right? Your meetings will always end on time. So it's not like you can't squeeze in everything you want to discuss in those scheduled 30 minutes or 45 minutes. It's just that just because you have the liberty of time, you're going to extend it for no reason. It doesn't make any sense. If you could just put like a hard stop to every discussion, I'm sure you can cover everything in that scheduled time itself.
totally agree. I want to switch gears here and I want to talk a little bit about wellness programs and just like recognition, which Smitty, I feel like you can write a book about. You probably have written a book about. But even as the founder of Confetti, like I know a monthly yoga class isn't going to fix burnout. I always tell our customers, like a monthly yoga class isn't going to fix toxic culture. Like that's hard work. So I would love to know, like, what actually works when coming to supporting your employees and more specifically, like we know that like appreciation, just like small things make such a big difference, but like recognition isn't always like a one size fits all. So like what are some meaningful ways leaders can show appreciation that actually resonates when it comes to burnout as well? And
Yeah, I
Smitty, maybe you can give a starter.
Okay, so I think from a well-being standpoint, like you said, it isn't about like if you're doing just a single yoga class, you're literally just doing a tick in the box. It's like, okay, we need to do a wellness initiative this quarter. Oh, let's do a yoga class. Next quarter, let's do a Pilates class, and we're done. that doesn't resolve your issues of burnout or well-being. It has to be a holistic approach for driving wellness programs for your employees, right from, say, physical well-being to mental well-being to psychological safety, to appreciation, where employees actually feel that they belong and they're feeling recognized for the work that they do. We're living in an era where people aren't that motivated by, say, money anymore. I mean, there was an era where people would switch primarily for money, but we've reached an era where almost everyone, at least in an industry, pays competitively. And it's not like, okay, I'm going to switch from this company to that company. I'm going to get like a 50% or 100% hike. And for just that 10-15% difference in my salary, I might not want to switch if I'm feeling good in my current workplace. So if your current workplace is able to create a culture of recognition where I feel that I matter, my work is valued, and my opinion is taken seriously into consideration, and all the hard work I'm putting in is actually being appreciated in the right manner, I will think twice before going to that other interview when a recruiter approaches me, because I'm in a safe space. So, as a company, if we can identify what makes my employees feel psychologically safe and feel that this is the right place for me, it will be the end of my attrition problems as a company. And that's where holistic well being makes a huge impact by driving. One is, of course, physical well being programs beyond even just health insurance. Second, mental well-being programs, employee assistance programs. If they're stressed out, can they speak to somebody? Is the company supportive enough for that? And beyond recognition, I think you could also drive community building programs where I could connect with like-minded people in my organization. You could also encourage a lot of volunteer work. I think people generally feel better when they give to the society, and those organizational led programs eventually help to a holistic well-being solution for employees.
I love
I love
all of those ideas, Smitty. I really do. I think that they're brilliant. It's interesting. And Lee, you brought up this. A yoga class isn't going to solve it, and I don't think you could be more spot on. Primarily because that's just an activity, and without taking a broader lens as to what is the problem, like what can we even put a goal? And I think we've got a lot of HR people here, so I'm going to throw out, like, can we create a SMART goal around wellness? And then you can start to layer in, okay, a yoga class, like that might have might have an impact, but other things might have an impact. But can we actually think about, like, what is the true problem? What are we trying to solve for? How are we going to measure it? Does it seem realistic or budgetarily supported in the organization? Then you start to get into some real tangible ways to move the needle.
Yeah. And I want to move on, but I'll just say, like, where I find activities as a company that, sells them, promotes them, it's like these are really great ways to get your team to connect with one another in a
Hmm.
way that's a little bit different, and usually see each other outside of the pure work lens. Like, now all of a sudden you're seeing your boss like do downward dog or whatever it is, like, it
It's the
humanizes
human
us.
part, right? That human
Exactly.
connection, Lee. Yeah.
And I think that helps establish, it starts to help establish those healthy things. Like, maybe you thought your boss is kind of a jerk, and now all of a sudden you're laughing with them about trivia and you're seeing a new side of them that might help you
Mhm.
feel more comfortable to, like, open up and share the truth of how you're feeling. Like, that's where activities come into place. But I agree with you, Kristen. Like, wellness is much more holistic than that. So, speaking of kind of wellness, talking a little bit more about, like, setting boundaries, which we talked about, like, when the manager sends you a Slack at 10 p.m., how do we get leaders to model the behaviors that they expect? And Kristen, maybe
I'll
we'll
tell
start with you.
Yeah, I mean, for us, we spend a lot of time helping customers to define what are their organizational values, and not just, oh, we value collaboration, but how does collaboration manifest? Like, what are the actual behaviors that we would see at, at an executive level, at an individual contributor level, at a, leader level? When we can put those values into behaviors, I think that that's where you start to see people able to walk the walk or talk the talk, because then you're putting language around what it means. And for us, that has been just truly enlightening for a lot of our organizations to work with, is just to give words to what we're expecting here. And then that gets translated. You think about, like, if you say we value work life integration and it's part of our values, we talk about it all the time, and managers aren't keeping it. I mean, it makes it so much easier for an individual contributor to say, hey, you're not walking the talk, tell me a little bit more about that. I just think it opens up conversations, and it makes it easier to discuss, like, what somebody's perception of maybe balance is compared to somebody else's perception of balance.
Yeah. And Chris, maybe we can stick with you since I want to make sure we all leave on time. I don't want to take our
We don't
bad
want to be
habits
part
and
of that, that thing. Yeah.
but maybe some closing thoughts. But burnout, it's not new. The conversation is evolving. Like, what do you think the future of workplace well-being looks like in 5 to 10 years? Are we on the right track? Do we still have a long way to go? Or maybe do you just have like one piece of advice you can leave us with, like to a leader who just wants to reduce burnout and boost retention? Like, what does this look like?
Mhm. Well, I mentioned it already, and I think that it deserves kind of re-bringing that up, is define what success looks like. That, if I mean, it's not an easy exercise, but if you go through it and then everybody is super clear, then I think that it does have the ability to minimize, the extras that people are going through, or the anxiety or the
Yeah.
stress related to that. If I know I'm successful, then I'm ready.
And I don't know every person that's on this call, but I want to tell you guys that doing this exercise isn't something that needs to start with a CEO or the head of HR. It's great if they do that, and I highly recommend them to do that. But if you're a team lead and you're hearing this, like, you can do this with your own
Hmm.
team. You can build that culture at least for the 5 or 10 of you. And even if you're not a manager, or even if you're just part of a team and you want to pull together this exercise, bring it to your manager for approval. Encourage you to do so. Smitty, some closing thoughts on your side? What
Oh gosh, future of workplace well-being. You know what? It's really weird. I think we're in a world where there are like 4 or 5 generations working together in the
Hmm.
same office, and they don't speak each other's language. Like, you got the millennials, you got the Gen Zs, now you have Gen Alpha, Gen Beta. God knows what they're gonna be like, but it's they're all very different people. So I think the bigger challenge for organizations to navigate in the next 5 to 10 years is going to be, how do you deal with this new generation? How do you understand their needs better? And a lot of feedback, like two-way feedback, can really help bridge that gap. And I think feedback, usually the mistakes most companies do is they do like a one-way feedback. Like, a manager is going to give feedback for their team member. But I think it's also important to take reverse feedback. Like, do you think you are supported enough by your manager? Do you think you feel like you belong in this organization? What else could the organization do to cater to your needs better? Because that one size fits all strategy does not fit anymore in this world we're in. So I think from a future standpoint, it's going to be more flexy. It's going to be more open in terms of cultural feedbacks, nuances, and it's going to be interesting, but we still have a long way to go to navigate these challenges.
I think the more that data plays into this role as well, the more that wellness will be prioritized, the more that we can actually prove through uh, tools like that you're building, Smitty, at Advantage Club AI, like that the data that we can support to prove that this is actually not just like a nice to have, but a need to have and a core part of the business, I think is really great. So I want to follow the footsteps of TriNet, but burnout isn't going to disappear overnight. If we keep pushing ourselves for the cultures that Smitty just brought up, the ones that prioritize balance and well-being and actual support, not just lip service, we can actually start turning the tide together as a community, as a group. So I encourage you in the last 2 minutes, maybe to just take a big deep breath and stretch and grab a glass of water, go to the bathroom, do whatever you need to feel kind of rejuvenated going into that next meeting. And my challenge to everyone is like, what's one small thing you can do this week to make your workplace a little more resilient, a little bit more calm and less burnouty?
That's the new word of the day, right, Lee?
Burnouty.
Yep.
Yeah, let's agree to stop scheduling meetings without agendas is what Kristen's fighting for. And some battles are worth fighting. So until next time, take care of yourselves and your people. And thanks so much for joining us. And we hope to see y'all soon. Thanks, Kristen. Thanks,
Thanks,
Smitty.
Lee. Bye, Smitty.
Appreciate it.
Hi, Kristen. Bye, Lee.